This is the Creative Market Free Goods Roundup for the week of May 18th, 2015. As usual, there are 6 different free goods this week, but they are free this week only. So if you see something you like, be sure to check out the description of this video where I'll place links to each one of these 6 different free items. So first up here is Transport App Template. So this is a nice and straightforward HTML and CSS theme, and it doesn't use anything like WordPress, so you can just upload these files to a web server and you should be good to go. And it's based around presenting an app, so it's a pretty focused idea in that aspect. So if you do have an app and you're looking for a basic landing page for it, this might be a perfect thing for you to pick up. On the top here we have a mock-up of an iPhone that scrolls through some different images. I think that's a pretty cool way of displaying this information, as well as buttons for the App Store as well as Google Play. As I scroll down here, there is a nice video embed, as well as below it some different callout areas, and this particular file does include 2 different HTML files, and basically the main difference between them is that it swaps the position of this video and then these callout files. So on this version the video is on top, and on the other version the video is below these different callout elements right here. As you go down to the bottom here, there's once again a button for the App Store as well as Google Play. And at the very bottom here, there is a footer with social networking links as well as an email button. So nice and straightforward theme, and I also should note that this theme is responsive, so it should look good on no matter what kind of device you are using, which makes a lot of sense for something meant to display phone apps. And of course, if you're very comfortable with HTML and CSS, you could remove different elements like this phone right here, and then you could make this a much more versatile theme for all sorts of different stuff. But that's it for this theme. If you liked what you saw, just be sure to pick it up this week. Next up is Serendipityscript, which is a font. This font is provided in both OpenType, TrueType, as well as web font formats, and I have it opened up inside Adobe Illustrator here to show it. And as you can see, it includes both lowercase as well as uppercase letters, as well as numbers, and then all the basic punctuation. If I go to type and then glyphs near the top here, you can see everything that's included with this font. So it has all the expected stuff, but nothing too crazy. But it does cover everything that you'll need for at least English. And of course, you could always go in and add custom accent marks or other things like that if you have to. But I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer on these lowercase letters here so you can see how these look up close. They're all very nice and rounded and quite smooth in their appearance. So you can tell some time was spent making sure that these letters look nice and evenly done. I did notice a little bit of overlapping issues right here, as you can see on this U to the V and then the V to the W, where this overlaps, it turns into this kind of white overlapping shape. But if I right click and create outlines, it actually makes that go away. So I think that's just a graphical bug and maybe not a problem with the font itself. But here is the remaining part of the lowercase letters, and all the uppercase letters do a nice job of matching the visual style of the uppercase letters right here. So I'm just going to scroll through these very quickly and then jump on down to the numbers as well as the special characters here. So it has all the numbers from 0 to 9, as well as all the basic punctuation marks that you'll come to expect in a font. And I typed out Free Goods Roundup right here so you can see how this looks when it's actually typed out into a sentence. I think it has a really nice flow to it, and this particular style of font has been very popular on Creative Market lately. So it's cool to see a font in that style showing up on the free goods. I think this will be a pretty popular free item this week. So if you liked this font and you think it might have some use for it, either now or in the future, just be sure to pick it up this week. Next up is Seashells set. This is a collection of C elements in both JPEG as well as EPS file formats. So I have the EPS files opened up inside Illustrator here to show them. And I didn't open up every file since there are quite a few, but I did open up 5 of them, which will give you a really good idea of what to expect with this pack as a whole. So this first one right here is actually one of my favorites because the color palette is really strong, and I also think the illustration is very strong. If you look at this a little bit closer, you can tell that these have a pretty neat looking watercolor overlay effect to them. So this file does a pretty nice job of making the watercolor effect work inside a vector format, which isn't always a very easy thing to do. The color palette on this particular shell right here is super cool in my opinion, with this nice selection of blues and purples. Now I'm just going to quickly go through all the remaining elements here before I jump on to the next page. This particular page has a bunch of different stuff you can use, and you can also just grab one of the items and pull them off to the side and use only that element if you want to. So if you just want a starfish, you can drag just this element and then use it on any project you want. So this file right here is a seamless repeating pattern, and these have a lot of different seamless repeating patterns included in them. So it's nice that they did make these all seamlessly repeat in terms of patterns they present. And you can of course click on the background, for example, and then double click on the fill to change the color of it. And then you can grab the foreground elements right here and change the color of those. Changing this white might look pretty bad since it's going to invert everything, but it does let you know that you can go ahead and change all these colors. So here's this next one, which has a really large watercolory background. And on top of it there is a seashell overlaid, as well as some type right here. The type is outlined, so you won't be able to change that, but if you want to use just certain words, you could use just the word sea, for example, or remove this type and just replace it with your own of a similar font. So here's the next one with just some black and white illustrations of all these different elements that we saw on this first page right here. that are colored in. So if you want a little bit more simplified version, these might come in pretty handy. And here's the last one I'm going to show. So a kind of neat background right here. And on top of it, there is this various textured element stuff that is all vector as well. So if you want to use this as just some pretty neat texture, it has a very unique appearance to it, in my opinion, that actually looks pretty cool. So you could just layer this over different designs that aren't this particular one if you want to use just that. And I did also repeat this just so you can see that this does seamlessly repeat, and it does a very nice job of it as well. So I'm just going to hover over all this and then drag it downwards so I can show you the full repeat if I continued expanding it down. So it does a pretty good job of pulling that repeat off, and it doesn't look like a repeat, like there isn't an obvious repeating pattern in here. It looks nice and natural, so that's a pretty good job on the author's part for creating a pattern that works pretty well. But that's it for this pack, and do remember this is just a small section of all the different stuff that's included, but it's a pretty good overview of what to expect. So if you liked what you saw, just be sure to pick it up this week while it's still free. Next up is Resume Template, the Emily. And I actually don't have Microsoft Word installed to check these out, so I'll just place a link in the description where you can check out the product page and then view the images of the template, and you can kind of see if it'll work out for you or not. It's a pretty straightforward resume template that should be pretty useful for anyone looking for a nice and straightforward, but yet still well-designed resume template inside Microsoft Word. So next up here is Kyle's Photoshop Brush Mini Pack. This is a collection of brush tool presets for Adobe Photoshop, and to load them up, just make sure you click on the down arrow next to the brush icon and not the actual icon for all the different brush types. If you click on the brush icon logo and then the gear, you go to Load Tool Presets, and that's where you'll actually go in there and load these brushes up. So I have my document open up right here just so I can show these brushes, and I should note that I'm at 200%, so these will look a little bit more blurry than they actually are. It just makes it easier for you to actually see how these different brushes look. So I'm just going to go through some of the different brushes that are included here so you can kind of see how these look. And I might be increasing the size of many of these as well so you can get a bit better idea of how these appear and some of the fine details that are inside. And with a lot of these brushes, it also helps a lot if you want to layer them. And I should also note that I'm not using a pen tablet, although if you do have a pen tablet, that is probably the best way you can go ahead and use these different brushes, as a pen tablet has the built-in sensitivity, so it'll actually make these look even more realistic when you go in there and create them, since the pen tablet is much better than a mouse at creating depth. So I'm just going to keep on applying some of these different brushes here, and there's quite a nice selection of them. This isn't a huge pack of brushes, but the ones that are included are all very nice, so it's a pretty nice thing to see. Sometimes packs are really large, but there's only a few usable brushes inside those. So on this particular pack, all these should find some good use if you are an avid Photoshop drawer. So here's the next brush right here. I'm just going to paint over all this so I can get a bit of a clean slate here, and then I'm going to use a bit darker version of it on the top of it, just so you can see this a little bit better. There's a lot of really cool texture and variance with these brushes, so they're pretty fun to use. And there's just a couple more brushes here, but I'm getting to some of my favorite ones personally. I'm just going to make this one a little bit larger and then lighten it up a little bit so you can kind of see how the brush lightens up on the edges and has kind of a cool random effect to it. So I'm going to delete this entire layer here and just make a new one so I can start to make some watercolors, which this brush pack also includes. So I'm going to start a base layer of watercolor right here, just to get a nice base. If you're painting something like a sky, this might be a super handy brush to have. And I'm going to go over it with a slightly darker version of the brush. And I should note, even if I just went over it with the same color again, it'll automatically darken up kind of like a real watercolor would. So it should be very easy for you to go in here and layer using these different brushes. And also it's really cool if you use different colors with the watercolor brushes, as it adds some pretty unique characteristics to the way these overlap, and it is quite realistic in the way it handles it. So as you can tell, this is already making a pretty cool effect in my opinion, just using some simple color overlays. And here's the next watercolor brush, which just behaves a little bit differently. I'm actually just going to delete this layer quick and start a fresh one. So I'm going to lay down a base layer very quickly here by just painting this up real quick, and then I'm going to add another color over the top of it so you can once again see those color interactions that I thought were pretty cool. So this is a very nice collection of brushes with a pretty realistic look to them. I think these do a really nice job of conveying all the different types of media for which they are designed to imitate. So if you enjoy drawing in Photoshop and you want some new brushes to take your stuff to the next level, this pack might be super useful for you to pick up. Just be sure to grab it this week while it's still free. And last up here is 3 color badges. These badges are included in EPS, Illustrator, as well as PNG and JPEG formats, although the JPEG versions are flattened with an image behind them, so the PNG, AI, as well as the EPS formats will probably be the most useful for you. And each one has 3 separate files that are all the same in terms of the badges that are included, but they have different colors. So this one is blue, this one is the coral version, and this one is called latte. So I'm going to use the coral version to show since it's a very nice and vibrant color. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit closer on these so you can get a better look. All these elements have a very nice texture overlaid on top of them, And they also have nice rough edges that make these look a little bit more hand-drawn or handmade than your typical digital banner might have. And I think a lot of these different elements would be really handy on labeling or something similar to that. Like this one right here reminds me a lot of a beer label. So if you're looking to create some nice and handmade appearing labeling for different projects, these might come in super handy. There isn't any type included or overlaid on these, but you can certainly add that in yourself. Any handmade or well-rounded font would probably work really well on these, or you could also just hand draw in your own type if you're feeling a bit more adventurous and want to do that. But a really nice pack of different vector badges, and since they are vector, you can use them on pretty much anything you could think of, since you won't lose any quality as you resize them. So I think this might come in pretty handy for quite a few different people. So if these look like something you might have use for, just be sure to pick them up this week. So that's it for this week's free goods, and do remember they are free this week only. So if you saw something you liked, be sure to check out the description of this video where I'll place links to all the different free items. And as always, if you like this video, please like and favorite, and if you want to see this video every week, please subscribe. This video is released every Monday to let you know it's free this week on Creative Market. Thank you for watching.